If you look at history, or honestly, just scroll through the news today, it's clear that navigating conflict, all that chaos,
Yeah.
it's not just hard, it feels impossible sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We always seem forced into this corner, side A or side B, us versus them, and you feel like you have to pick one, even when, well, maybe both sides feel a bit off, morally speaking.
Right. It's that binary trap.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into some really interesting source material. It's a college-level curriculum shared by one of you, a listener from the Hale Institute.
Okay.
And it tackles this core challenge head-on, moral alignment, especially when things are really turbulent.
A very relevant topic then.
Definitely. Our mission here is to explore this idea they call the third side. And let's be super clear right away, this isn't about being neutral. It's not about sitting on the sidelines. It's about taking an active stance, guided purely by conscience. And the goal, it's pretty ambitious, finding deeper healing and real lasting justice, not just a quick fix or temporary peace.
Yeah, and it's probably worth mentioning, just for context, that this study doesn't just come out of nowhere. It builds directly on earlier work they did, something called Who Writes History, a chronological and philosophical study, 1500 to 2050.
Ah, okay.
That groundwork basically established that, look, history is always filtered. Always. Understanding those filters, how stories get told, that's really the essential first step before you can even start talking about moral alignment.
Makes sense. You have to know how the story usually gets written first.
Precisely. So, okay, let's unpack this idea of the two typical sides first, because that's the road we're usually stuck on.
Right. Got to define the main road before you can talk about a detour or a different path entirely. The source material lays out that traditional binary really clearly. It's how most conflicts get reported, how they're remembered. So you've got side A, the victors. Simple enough. They're generally the ones writing the history books, putting up the statues, creating the narrative from their perspective, power, conquest, making it all sound justified.
They control the message.
They do. And what's really crucial here, the sources point out, is that these victors, sometimes they are aligned with justice, maybe liberation, but other times they're aligned with oppression, tyranny. It totally depends on the situation.
Right. It's not inherently good or bad to be the victor.
Exactly. But no matter their ethical stance, they tend to use that power to shut down other perspectives, silence dissent. They want to control the legacy.
Okay, so that's side A.
Then you have side B, the oppressed or resisting side. In history books, or the stories told by side A, they're often painted as, rebels, troublemakers, martyrs maybe, or just threats to the established order.
The underdogs or the villains, depending on who's talking.
Pretty much. Now, this side is often genuinely fighting for something important, liberation, dignity, trying to right some serious wrongs. But, and this is a key point in the sources, or really challenging nuance, in their fight for survival, they might end up replicating the very harm that was done to them.
That's a tough one.
It really is. That idea that you could replicate harm even when you're fighting for dignity, it's kind of shocking. How does that actually happen?
Well, the sources suggest it happens when the means you use start to become the end. When side B starts using the same dehumanizing tactics as side A, maybe it's revenge, pure retribution, or just mirror image violence.
An eye for an eye.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
When that happens, they end up validating the whole conflict framework itself.
Yeah.
They might flip who's in power, sure, but they don't actually transform the system.
So the cycle just continues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The curriculum points out that this failure, this inability to rise above the conflict's methods, is what keeps the violence going, generation after generation.
Wow.
And this leads straight into the shared problem for both sides. Both the winners and the losers, the oppressors and the oppressed, they almost always claim absolute moral righteousness. They're the good guys. The other side is pure evil.
Total conviction.
Total conviction. And when you're deep in it, caught in the fog of war, or just drowning in propaganda, telling right from wrong gets incredibly hard. Your sources really hammer this point. It's fueled by fear, by the ideologies we inherit, by that groupthink pressure that just crushes any space for quiet, individual moral thought.
They're forced into seeing things in black and white.
Completely. Good versus evil. No room for gray.
Which is exactly why this third side idea is so compelling. And this is where it gets really interesting because, again, it's not about neutrality. It's not passive.
Right.
It's about taking what the sources call a higher vantage point. It's about active moral imagination.
Okay, so defining that vantage point.
Yeah, the term itself, according to the curriculum, was actually coined by William Ury, the conflict mediator.
Yeah.
He used it to describe like the surrounding community, the people not directly fighting, who could encourage the two sides to, step back, talk instead of fight.
Okay, like a mediator role. That's the origin, yes. But this Hale Institute material seems to take it further, expanding it beyond just negotiation. They frame the third side more as a necessary spiritual and ethical stance, held by individuals with courage.
So it's an internal compass, not just an external role.
I think so. Yeah. If we look at the so what does the third side actually do?
Yeah.
The sources list 3 core actions that really set it apart. First, it seeks understanding over dominance. It asks why, not how do I win.
Okay, understand first.
Second, it protects the dignity of all parties. And that includes recognizing the humanity of the people you see as the enemy. That's a big one.
Whoa, okay. Dignity for everyone, even the bad guy.
Even the perceived bad guys.
Yeah.
And third, it actively holds space for truth, healing, and ultimately transformation. Not just winning, but changing the whole dynamic.
Seeking understanding, fine. But protecting the dignity of all parties, especially if one side is like clearly doing terrible things, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
But is it practical? Doesn't refusing to condemn just, help the oppressors maintain power?
That is the absolute core question, isn't it? And the sources are clear. The third side isn't defined by inaction. It's defined by the quality of its action.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you ignore injustice. Absolutely not. It means you address the injustice without falling into that trap of vengeance or dehumanizing the other side. It's rooted in something the curriculum calls intergenerational responsibility.
Intergenerational responsibility, what's that?
It means acting in a way that thinks about the long term, about the health of your grandchildren, rather than just the immediate satisfaction of hitting back.
Wow, that requires a lot.
It requires huge ethical discernment, being open to complexity, to contradiction, to pluralism, recognizing that basically no conflict is ever pure black and white, good versus evil.
So it forces you to resist simplifying things. You have to look deeper at the system, at the hurt that's driving the anger, maybe.
Exactly right. And if you look through history, the people who actually embody this, they're usually not the kings, not the generals. The source material points again and again to educators, artists, spiritual leaders.
The bridge builders.
The bridge builders. Those people who operate outside the main political fight and just refuse to get sucked into either side's propaganda machine.
It sounds incredibly noble, almost saintly. But, going back to the sources, we need to see if this actually works in the real world. It has to be active, it has to be courageous, not just a nice philosophy.
Agreed. It can't just be theory.
So let's look at some of the powerful historical examples they provide. I mean, one of the most famous has to be Nelson Mandela, right? In post-apartheid South Africa.
A classic example.
Think about the pressure on him to go for revenge, just flip the power structure, punish the white minority. The pressure must have been immense.
Unimaginable.
But his third side action, as the sources frame it, was choosing reconciliation, setting up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, focusing on truth, on dignity, not just on political payback.
Yeah, and think about the risks he took doing that. He could have easily fractured his own movement. Many people on his side, side B, who had suffered terribly, they wanted immediate, harsh justice, retribution. His choice, though, it created a framework for healing that fundamentally rejected that idea that violence is the only answer to violence. It was, prophetic statesmanship, focusing on the long-term health of the entire nation. That's that intergenerational responsibility in action.
Insanely powerful.
We also see what the source calls the unifying model. They point to Abdul-Baha during the chaos when the Ottoman Empire was collapsing during World War I.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, while everything was falling apart around her empires, factions fighting, he just modeled unity. Tireless service to everyone, regardless of background. He actively refused to pick a side, refused any political or ethnic factionalism.
So he demonstrated that moral alignment is possible even when the state itself is failing.
Exactly, even amidst total chaos.
And then for just pure prophetic resistance, the White Rose movement, Nazi Germany.
Chilling, but important.
These were students. They knew they couldn't fight tanks with guns. Their resistance was completely moral. They spoke truth, distributing leaflets without violence, standing against the entire Nazi machine. They understood that their conscience, their voice, was their most powerful weapon, not force.
Which underscores a difficult point the sources make.
What's that?
That these individuals, these third side actors, they weren't fighting a conventional war. They were fighting, you could say, for the moral soul of their nation. Their sacrifice shows that the third side is often prophetic, often marginalized during the conflict.
Right, not celebrated at the time.
Well, often not. But ultimately, it can lead to a more enduring kind of justice because it focuses on healing the whole system, not just swapping who's in charge.
And we even see this idea institutionalized sometimes, right? Like the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, not just in South Africa, but Canada too.
Yes, good point. Those weren't set up as courts to assign blame or declare victory. They were formal structures designed specifically to hold that space for healing, for historical accountability.
Allowing stories to be heard that the usual binary side A versus side B would have just suppressed.
Exactly. Creating a documented memory, a shared truth. That serves that third side perspective long term.
That realization feels critical for us now. So, okay, what does all this mean for us today? In our world, which feels more polarized than ever, maybe? Especially with information overload.
Yeah, what are the modern challenges? What makes living this third side so incredibly difficult right now?
Well, the sources list quite a few obstacles, and frankly, they sound like they were written yesterday. War and conflict always distort how we see things. That's timeless.
Sure.
But today, propaganda and fear, they're weaponized through technology, right?
Sure.
To actively suppress moral reflection. It makes it almost impossible to just pause, think ethically outside of your chosen group.
The noise is constant.
And maybe the most dangerous thing, groupthink, overriding individual conscience. That feeling that, well, the algorithm keeps showing me this, everyone I know online agrees, so it must be the objective truth.
And that's a huge danger.
Yeah.
Our basic human tendency in a crisis is to run towards the safety of a group, an ideology.
Safety in numbers.
Right. But now, our digital world is often designed specifically to reinforce those group boundaries. Algorithms literally create echo chambers that filter out the very nuance, the complexity that the third side depends on.
So if you even try to introduce a third perspective,
You risk getting attacked from both sides. Side A might call you a traitor. Side B might call you naive or uncaring.
damned if you do.
Pretty much. But, and this is important, if we connect this to the modern era, this age of information, even AI, there's actually a huge opportunity alongside the danger.
Oh, how so?
Well, yes, these tools can spread propaganda faster than ever, but they also provide ways for more diverse, pluralistic truth-telling. We can access global perspectives almost instantly. It's much harder to completely silence dissenting voices now than it was, say, 50 years ago, when a few gatekeepers controlled all the information flow.
Okay, so the tech itself isn't good or bad, it just amplifies things. It gives us the option to seek out complexity, if we actively choose to use it that way.
Exactly. But that choice requires real ethical literacy. You have to know how to look, what to look for.
Which brings us back to learning.
It does. That's where education is key. The source really emphasizes this. We need to cultivate ethical literacy, historical awareness, and not just history as a list of facts, but history as a series of moral choices and their consequences.
Understanding the why behind events.
Yes. And the path forward, according to these materials, also involves spiritual and poetic frameworks. The ability to imagine a better future, to use metaphors and stories, to guide our discernment beyond just raw political ideology. We need tools to help us see past the surface battles and identify the deeper human currents. This is the intellectual work, really, of building your own internal conscience compass.
A conscience compass. I like that. Okay, this has been, well, a really powerful exploration. Let's try to sum up the core takeaway. The third side, it's not a retreat, it's not passivity. It's an act of proactive moral imagination. It reframes what action means. It changes the goal from just winning to actual transformation. And it invites all of us, you listening, whether you're a creator, a student, just a citizen, to see ourselves not just as passive spectators of history, but as potential stewards, stewards of memory, stewards of dignity, recognizing that our individual ethical choices, however small they feel, they actually build the foundation for a more enduring kind of justice.
Well said. And that leads perfectly into a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. This comes from the suggested curriculum extensions in the sources.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the goal is really to try and embody this third side in our own lives, how might you start mapping the complexities around you? How could you create your own mental conscience compass to evaluate things happening now or things in the past? Maybe by mapping out the forces of power, dignity, and retribution you see at play.
visualizing those forces.
Exactly. And then what personal bridge of witness, what mental space of ethical non-alignment, of deep listening that you need to build to visualize so you could genuinely step beyond the easy binary thinking in your own community, in your own life.